Hello, Bobby Torres of Frightbox recording here to show you a real-world example of how I use clipping, saturation, and EQ to polish off raw multi-track drum tracks. Now, one thing I've been doing more and more recently out of my studio is recording bands live, all at once, everyone playing together with video in my studio. And just a few weeks ago, I had a great band called Disempath in, and I've decided to mix those drum tracks, those raw drum tracks, live with members of my private community, the Frightbox Mix Crypt. Now, in this video, I've decided to go in and clip out some of the key points from that live stream where I demonstrate how I'm using saturation, clipping, and EQ, again, to polish off raw drum tracks so you can learn something from this and apply these techniques to your own recordings, especially if you're recording multi-track drums in your home studio. So without any further ado, let's jump into the drum mix. So I'm not gonna finish this mix today, but I'm gonna kind of like get it in the zone. So these drums right now are all going to my 2-bus, right? My master bus. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to send all of them, including cymbals. Yeah, let's send all of these to a drum bus. And like I said earlier, I think Cody asked about my routing. Now for live mixes, I've really had to be careful because I don't want to overcompress them because they will sound like crap because live performances are not perfect. If I make it super punchy, crystal clear, it's going to sound weird. You know, it's not the same as a studio recording. There are elements that are obviously cross over, but in general, I find that I have to take a slightly different, more organic approach, and I enjoy it. So create a new aux here. I'm going to name this drums. I found also with live productions, I don't like to pull from a template. I like to kind of do it from scratch a lot of the times. It's just different for me. From years and years and years of doing studio productions, it's fun to kind of get into this world. So, all right, my drums now should be coming through my drum bus. There we go. Now my cymbals are sounding kind of thick, so I'm gonna kind of just get rid of some of these lower mids. And that snare is killing me. Meaning transient-wise. So let's get some tape saturation to deal with these drums to kind of soften them and make them sound a little more analog and shave off some transient. Let's go with Kramer tape. I like Kramer tape on my drums. It's a little more subtle as far as like, it's not saturated sounding, but it does a good job of lopping off transient. Nice. I'm even gonna clip this sample, the snare sample. Okay, so I'm gonna really kind of reduce transient on this snare sample. Remember, my snare samples are raw. They're not slate samples that are already pre-processed. They're completely raw. So I have to go in there and really, treat them as a raw file. So too transient heavy. So I'm gonna go with Jordan's clipper is my favorite clipper by far. I like JST clip also. I just like that with Jordan's, I could see, or Jordan Valeriot, the owner of Black Salt Audio, I can keep the level as it is and just bring the threshold down. I really like that. There we go. Nice, cool. And I'm gonna boost some top on the sample. And I feel like there's too much low end on the live snare. So I'm gonna scoop some of that out and get some of the beef from the sample. And on the actual kick drum here, I'm gonna go to the kick sample and I'm gonna just throw a random EQ. I'll go with this SSL EQ just to boost some top end on the sample. And then maybe back off the sample, increase the live's kick. Nice. Now, Cody also asked how I'm gonna treat my rooms. I'm gonna treat them separately because I can't squash everything together. You're gonna get this bleed. So let's listen to the hallway mics. Love it. I have a reverb set up. Let me juice up this snare bottom. I don't need any of that low. I already have so much beef from the snare top. I'm gonna do my usual thing here. Add that three-dimensional sound by sending a boatload of snare bottom to the reverb, but less direct sound on the snare bottom. Take this here. Now, people always ask me, why don't you just do pre-fader send instead of post-fader send? Because I like to still have the volume I have on my fader for the snare bottom reflected in the sends. Oh, so Aaron says, I don't think I've ever seen you use auto align on drums. It's the first thing I do on my overheads and shells. Dude, I've tried that stuff in the past and it's done nothing for me, to be honest with you. So that's why I don't do it. They made great recordings before that existed. You know what I mean? Like if there's an obvious problem with phase with the drums, maybe I'll mess with that kind of thing. But I don't know, man. Like people always complain online, like, oh, dude, don't you check the phase? I can count on one hand after recording at least 1,000 drum sets in my life or more, the amount of time I've had issues with drum phase. And it's like, and it's usually obvious, like the snare is bleeding into the kick mic and you could hear the snare sounds weak. So then I could just either time align it or flip the phase. So that's just me. That's just me. Also, dude, you have to realize there's going to be bleed from the other instruments in these drums. This is a live recording. So that's why I try to not mess with timing too much on a live production because of all the bleed. I did it with the guitars, but the DI is clean, so I can get away with it. With drums, there's microphones involved. Also going to filter out more low stuff on the cymbals. I really don't need this. This mix is very thick in the mids. And let me grab, oh, of course, I need to roll off all the super deep subs on my drum sub mix. In other words, rolling off all the super deep subs on my kick that we don't need. I'm going to go everything below 40. I'm also going to slam the sample a little harder, sort of like parallel compression. Just reduce the output here. Now this is the room microphones in the actual studio, and there's a bunch of high frequency stuff I don't like, and I'm gonna keep them pretty dynamic. Let me dirty them up a little. Okay, Ben asks, what would the difference be between soft clipping and hard clipping in this case? To me, to my ears, soft clipping sounds a little more, and it's very vague, but soft clipping sounds a little more analog and lets a little more of the transient through, and hard clipping is more like brick wall limiting to my ears. Jordan's plugin, I don't know, to me kind of sounds soft-ish to me. I personally love it because it's just very subtle, and you have such fine control over the thresholds, and it's just so straightforward and simple. So to me, I'm clipping soft, in my opinion. That's how I look at it. I am not a huge fan of like super hard digital clipping. I'm not really a fan of. It doesn't sound good to me, unless I'm just clipping the very, very top of the transient, which is what I'm doing anyway. So Ben, good question. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, if you're looking to improve the sound of your mixes, it's critical to have a firm grasp on solid EQ and compression techniques. And this is why I'm offering you direct access right now for absolutely free to my crisp and clear heavy mix formula. The heavy mix formula is comprised of three main components: an EQ and compression cheat sheet that contains all of my starting points when it's time to mix a heavy production. Within the cheat sheet, there are clickable links to private mixing tutorials for all of the main instruments within a heavy production. And finally, there's a clickable link below each of the individual tutorials so you could download the exact same multi-tracks that I'm using so you can mix along with me. Again, the crisp and clear heavy mix formula is absolutely free, and there's a link below that you can click and you can have direct access right now. And until next time, happy mixing.